I always say like getting sponsors is like dating. Like you got to put yourself out there. You've got to make yourself desirable. Like why would somebody want to give me money?
Today's guest is Lacey Langford, an Air Force veteran, accredited financial counselor, and founder of Milmo and MilMoneyCon. Lacey shares how she built a mission-driven podcast, Milmo, attracted aligned sponsors, and launched MilMoneyCon to empower military financial professionals.
So, straightforward question right from the get-go. Why military people and not everybody?
That's an audience that resonates with me. So I grew up in the military. I ended up joining the military myself. Let's say you're a service member wanting to get out of the military. You might not know what you want to do. I started a financial coaching business to help the military community with money, but I really struggled with charging the military community to help them with money. It's like family, I need to make money at this, but I don't like charging. And so I ended up moving into like, okay, well, I need to have a third party pay for this. And that's when I started working to get sponsors for my show. And so the podcast really started out as marketing for my coaching business, like getting my name out there. And then that's how it kind of evolved how I make money and how the podcast grew and how I'm still able to do financial coaching for free.
So how did you find your first sponsor? What's the story behind it? How did you do that? What was your biggest challenge with the podcast and how did you walk around it?
Well,
Lacey, can you please tell me about your podcast?
Absolutely. So my podcast is the Milmo Show, and it's all about helping the U.S. military make, save, and invest money wisely through personal finance and entrepreneurship, because those are topics that really impact our community. The ability to make money when you're moving frequently is a challenge for the military community, and just manage money through all the transition and the unexpected that come with military life. So that is what the show is all about, is really helping the community be better with money and the management of it.
So, straightforward question right from the get-go. Why military people and not everybody?
Well, that's an audience that resonates with me. So I grew up in the military. My father served for over 20 years. I ended up joining the military myself and serving for 4 years. That's where I met my husband. 2 of my siblings are serving or have served. And so I come from a really big military family. So it's kind of like the family business. And then I had a passion for personal finance. That's something that I wanted to pursue after my service in the military. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that talked about money, about spending less than you make and saving. I didn't always listen to that when I was young and enlisted in the military. I like to go out and have a good time just like everybody else, and made some not good decisions with my money. But when I started to mature and realize, hey, this is, there's not a money tree. I do need to manage this and be able to take care of myself financially. That's what I wanted to go to school for then, was learning about investments and growing wealth and kind of passing that on to my children and, the next generation, kind of growing on what my mom and dad taught me and my siblings. I wanted to take it to the next level. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at, is I had this family business of military and, a passion and interest in learning more about money. And I just kind of mashed those two together.
Out of curiosity, what did you do in the military? Because I guess like in France, there is literally all the functions and all the jobs in the military. So what were you doing?
Yes. So my title was an information manager. And so I ended up doing a little bit of computer work, a lot of admin work, reviewing. Usually I worked for a commander or somebody doing admin work, like annual reports, reviewing things, scheduling. So just a lot of admin stuff.
Fair enough. So what's the link between managing one's personal finances and entrepreneurship? Is it because that's something that you see military people do a lot, struggle with their finance and wanting to start a business? Like, why the two together and not just one or the other?
Yes. So the ability to earn in the military community, you're limited by where, the government sends you and the restrictions that are put on you. So let's say you're a service member wanting to get out of the military. You might not know what you want to do. Unfortunately, in our community, a lot of people are dealing with some, struggles from their service and need to decompress. And so entrepreneurship is a big component for service members. And additionally, that they, might want to earn extra money to pay off debt. Maybe they got themselves into debt. And then there's the component of the military spouses, where it's really difficult to build their career and their earning ability around their service member's career. And so you have to take what you get. If there's a job available in the community, but it might not align with your profession, something that you have a degree or experience in, or something you're trying to pursue. And so it's like a puzzle. You're trying to figure out every time you move to a new duty location is, how am I going to earn money as a military spouse? And if you have things like a car payment that is dependent on the military spouse's income, then that's where people start to get into a lot of trouble, because now they've moved and they don't have a job, so they don't have the extra money to pay for that car payment. Anyway, so it kind of all just gets intertwined, is that this moving impacts their personal finance. And so often military spouses end up wanting to go into entrepreneurship to take control of their earning ability. And that's kind of how I got started, is that I never necessarily wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I was married to a service member that had a career that, they were gone a lot. And so it was difficult for me to be in the finance profession with his career. And so I wanted to make something that was portable. And so I didn't have to keep starting over every single time we move. So I think that's, a lot of people are like me, that they're having these struggles with their earning ability. And so entrepreneurship is a way to take control of that variability of moving.
So I much prefer this explanation. The reason I'm saying this is, you started with, military people need decompressing. And I was like, building a company, entrepreneurship, to decompress. We are not running the same type of businesses.
Yes. No, well, I think that is such a good point. You're right. If anybody ever told me how much work would go into entrepreneurship, I never would start it. Never, ever, ever. It is a lot. But I think it's more of, it starts as a side hustle, like a hobby, like woodworking or something like that.
Gotcha.
And that they can make a little bit of money without all of the stress. But yes, I 100% agree with you.
But that being said, like the spouse explanation is super interesting. Like, it's literally you're being, relocated wherever the military sends you, and what happens to your spouse, who is obviously married to you and following you. But it's like, yeah, but what do I do? And instead of indeed trying to find jobs in the community that would necessarily not fit whatever they've been trained on, building a business out of that specific education makes a lot of sense. What about the managing finances? Here again, I'm interested into understanding why is it something that military people will struggle with more than others? Is it because the wage that they are getting is different? The retirement plan is different? Like, how does it work?
A lot of it has to do with that military spouse component. So a lot of the military community is married.
Simple as that.
And not having, a spouse contribute, which is one thing, but then, because there's a lot of stay-at-home, wives and husbands in the military community that are taking care of children, which is necessary because, one parent is gone a lot of times, whether that's for deployment, whether that's for training, or just in general, their duty day, their work day. But it's really hard to, build up savings, especially if you've started in debt. A lot of people that join the military are coming in because they have a lot of debt. And so your paycheck, might not cover your ability to get out of debt. And so having a military spouse's income is important to that. And then with all these transitions that come with military life, the moving, not, maybe going to a school for your career path, that can cause a lot of upheaval in your budgeting every month. So thinking that, okay, hey, we have it all set, but now we're moving and we're going to need more childcare, or military spouse isn't going to have a job, or we might need to pay a little bit more for our home because it's going to be in a safer neighborhood, or, we want to be in this location because it has a better school district for our children. Well, that means more gas money to commute, a longer distance. So all these things that, every sometimes year or two, military service members and their families are moving. And so, if you're doing that every 2 years, that's difficult to really manage your money. And so it's being on top of it and then saving for the future, because most people get out of the military without ever having a retirement. And it's really important to save money for the future, which sometimes gets put on the backside. So there's all these little components that impact civilians. Definitely a lot of the same things apply, but it's this transition and the commitment of a 24-hour duty day that is difficult.
No, and that does make a lot of sense. And you help those people, so military and spouse of military gentlemen and ladies. So how do you help them? Is the podcasts explaining them how to manage finance, and then your service is to go deeper into this? Like, how do you mix the two together?
Yes. So I do things a little different or oddly, I think. I started a financial coaching business to help the military community with money. That's how I started into entrepreneurship, is to make my business portable wherever, my husband was stationed, that it could come with me. But I really struggled with charging the military community to help them with money. It's like
Interesting.
family. And I just really, that's my personality. I'm very empathetic. So I just really want to help. But that is not a great business model. That's volunteer work. That is pro bono work. It's not a business. So I have to make money. And so just kind of like how I got started into entrepreneurship, I got really mad one day. I was like, I need to take control of my earning ability and make this portable. And then one day I kind of got mad, like, I need to make money at this, but I don't like charging. And so I ended up moving into like, okay, well, I need to have a third party pay for this. Somebody that I can go to and be like, hey, this is who I want to help. This is what I want to do. Will you support this work? And so the podcast really started out as marketing for my coaching business, like getting my name out there. And also too, money is like going to a doctor. It's very intimate. People are telling me some of the most intimate things of their life, their relationships, their hopes and dreams, divorce, children, like all of these things. And so people really do need to get to know me before they really want to hire me. And so the podcast not only was a marketing tool, but it was a chance for people to get to know me and my personality, how I operate, because I don't resonate with everybody. Especially like if you're an engineer and really analytical, I might not be the perfect financial coach for you. And so that was a way to do that. But then it evolved to a way like I could still do financial coaching and help the military community, but I could do it for free if I get somebody else to pay the bill. And so then that's when I started working to get sponsors for my show and sponsors for the work that I want to do. So researching companies that I thought would be a good fit for my audience and would, respect them and take care of them the way that I want them taken care of. And then that's how it kind of evolved how I make money and how the podcast grew and how I'm still able to do financial coaching for free. I do charge now for business coaching because it's just kind of a different thing. But that way I can do that work and it sits right with my soul and it, works out, I think, for everybody.
Sits right with my soul. That's such a beautiful thing to say. I like it.
Thank you.
So, Lacey, I love this. And especially because we don't often get very tactical on this podcast about monetization. I mean, ways to monetize the podcast, monetization scheme, though I don't like to call it like this. But that's super interesting. So you have demand, right? You have people in the military, who are struggling with their finance and they are getting coaching from you, but you don't want to charge for this. And it wouldn't feel, I kind of feel you on the, hey, I don't want to charge people on how to fix their finances if I'm teaching them about fixing their finances because that's just another expense, which you can think as well. So like, okay, but you're going to invest a little bit, but then make sure that all the rest is fixed and right. But I do get you. When we get into the sponsorship scheme for a podcast, it's basically, brands are not, they are not more stupid than anybody else. If they invest in you, if they sponsor your show, it's because they are expecting brand awareness for sure, but also potentially a return on investment on this. So their hope or their bet is, okay, Lacey has built an audience of people who are my ideal clients. So if I get my name mentioned enough times in front of them, they will end up, purchasing from me as well. So they are trying at the end of the day to make a return on investment on this. But it sits better with your soul, sorry if I borrowed this expression because I love it, to have a sponsor who will eventually sell to your audience than you selling directly to them. That is super interesting.
Yes. Well, especially too, I brought it up a moment ago, when it comes to money, it's really important, like a doctor. But additionally, helping the military community is even more protected. A lot of people do try to take advantage of the military community because of their steady paycheck and the protections that, they have. Like they're always going to have a roof over their head. They're always going to have food on the table. Especially if you're a service member, you're going to be taken care of.
Wow.
And because of that fact, and a lot of, service members are very young. They're coming in at 17, 18 years old and having a really good paycheck for their age and their education. Sometimes they do get taken advantage of. And so anytime you're trying to get in front of a military audience as it relates to money, it's a very protected area. And so me having an audience that I'm an authentic member in that community, that is a draw for sponsors, that I can speak to the community. And that's wonderful that I have that opportunity. But it took a little bit for me to understand my value, like why, how could I get a sponsor? What should I charge for that? And then, really hitting home the responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah.
That I am allowing these people to get in front of my audience. I want to make sure that, I always say that my podcast is like my house. I just don't let anybody come in here and hang around my family. It's a protected space. And, as me as, the head of the household, it's my responsibility to make sure that, who I'm letting in is going to be respectful. And if they aren't, to show them the door really quickly.
Yeah.
And I've been very blessed to work with companies that understand that I'm not looking for short term, like 1 episode, 2 episode type of thing. I want a long-term relationship because I'm very serious about what I do. I did it for a very long time when I made zero money at it on the podcast. If I make zero money again, I'll continue to do my podcast. So aligning myself with companies that support that and understand, the perspective that I have, I think is really important.
Almost feels like you're doing this with a military discipline. I don't know if that's an English expression, but that's what we used to say in French.
Yes.
So how did you find your first sponsor? Like, what's the story behind it? How did you do that?
Well, first, I started saying it. I think that was really important.
Okay.
Is, hey, I'm looking for a sponsor. I'm looking for somebody that, would like to get, I believe one of the very first ones was a financial planning firm. So they were interested in getting clients. And I personally knew this financial planner and, how he charged people, how ethical he was, how he was as a human being. So I was comfortable with that. And I think it was just like maybe 4 shows. And that's what I try to do is a package, where it's, again, not just one, because it's a relationship to manage. There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure, the deal is done. And so I don't want to be doing that for onesie twosies. I want to do it, again, for longer term. But I started telling people about it. And then, before I had a sponsor, I started doing my own sponsorship reads for things like my coaching business or other things that I had going on. So I started to get comfortable with like, hey, this is who I am. I'm a sponsored podcast. And I do like a special birthday show every year for my birthday. And I believe like the first 2 years, I said that show was sponsored by my parents, just like as a joke, like, but it was still like I was doing a sponsorship read, like this is brought to you, since my birth date and all these things. And so really getting it out there and myself getting comfortable with it that, hey, I am a sponsored show. I may be different, but
that's so funny.
It took, because it takes confidence. I always say like getting sponsors is like dating. Like you got to put yourself out there, you got to make yourself desirable. Like why would somebody want to give me money? Why would somebody want to be working with me? And then I do a lot of research. I treat it almost like looking for stocks to buy. Like I do the research, I do the homework. So I have a list of companies I would love to work with. I've done homework on them. I have researched their X account, their social media accounts, hashtags that they use, things that they support. And so I'm able to craft a really good pitch because I know what they are doing and what I'm pitching is what they're missing and how I can fill that hole. And so I do a lot of research. I have this list and then I go and find the person to deliver that research to, that pitch to. That's using things like LinkedIn or social media. And that's how I started out, was like just doing a lot of homework. And I still do. If I'm on social media and something catches my eye or a company, add it to the list because you just never know. That's the thing with sponsors. You could lose sponsors at any time. So, I'm not too big for my britches to go out there and look for sponsors. Like that's, how I make money. And so if I lose sponsors, I'll be ready to switch gears really quickly.
Whew, I love this. Okay. So you launched the podcast. You're helping people, military people, with entrepreneurship and management of money. You don't want to charge them for that, so you find sponsors instead. You start launching coaching services as well, which are more one-to-one, and those ones people can eventually pay for. Am I correct so far?
Yes.
Okay. You then find sponsors to sponsor the show. That's awesome. And then you're organizing events, Lacey.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes. So as my podcast grew and that marketing started to work, me getting my name out there and people understanding the community that I work in, a lot of people started to come to me, other financial professionals in the military community, wanting to understand how I built my career around military life because, mine was a very non-traditional path. I have just been very intentional about making my own path. And I started to see there's actually a lot of people like me, people that are struggling to make money, that want to be a financial professional, that might not want to work in the advisor space, that might want to work in the coaching space or might want to work in education. And then, I get to talk to people all the time, like you do, like we're talking now on our podcast, and getting to hear what the work that they're doing and the things they're working on. And I started to realize other people aren't like me in that capacity, that they're not getting the opportunity to talk to all these people. So I would, for example, have somebody come on my show and say, hey, I'm going to start an app to help the military community with money because it's really needed and nobody's doing it. And I would be like, you're
Interesting.
right. It's really needed, but there's actually like 10 other people doing it. You just didn't know about them.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing all of these problems and, also too, just wanting to help more people. Like, it shouldn't be so difficult for you to build your career. And so again, one day I just got mad and I was like, I'm sick of seeing all these people struggle or not connect, not know about resources. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do an event and bring everybody together. Like, I'll just give this a go. And because of the foundation I had with my other business and my ability, I'd already learned how to find sponsors. It's not easy, but I knew like having an event would require me to get a lot of sponsorship because events are very expensive. And
Oh, yes, they
there
are.
is, yes, they are. And it was me taking on a lot more risk, like working with hotels and financially committing to room blocks and just, you don't know if anybody will show up. You don't know if anybody will buy tickets. So I thought, I really want to do this because I want to help people. There's nobody else doing it. I feel like it's really needed. And I thought if anybody's got a shot at this, I do. And so I thought I'll give it a go. And I sought out mentorship and I made a game plan and, knew it wasn't going to be, it probably never be a huge event because it's so niche. But I was more
Doesn't
focused
matter.
on, I was more focused on the impact. I still am. This year will be my 4th year. And
It's
that's really
crazy.
where I care about. I try not to get hung up in numbers. I do that same with the podcast. I'm not getting hung up on downloads, all of those things. I am more curious, and what sits right with my soul is the positive impact I can have on people. And so I applied that then to the events. And again, this, will just be my 4th year. So to be determined on how things will pan out with it. But I'm really excited, especially when I hear people say that it got them a job or it got them a mentor or it helped them. A lot of service members come to my event because they want to become a financial professional like me after they left the military. So I'm happy when I hear about all those things, and it kind of keeps you motivated when it gets stressful.
I bet. Have you tried launching a company to distress, Lacey? Is that something you? I'm
Oh,
kidding.
yes.
It's just a reference to the decompressing with entrepreneurship when you're in the military.
Yes. No, I
So,
have great ideas about that, though.
fair enough. So, you are tackling a completely different market again, right? So, first you help military people, which is pretty much B2C, right? It's like, hey, you're an individual struggling with XYZ problem, in this case, money or entrepreneurship, let me help. But now you're organizing a B2B event at the end of the day, right? So, first of all, how do you navigate this? Like, how do you properly address a B2C market, then create an event, which for sure is working, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it for 4 years in a row. So congratulations for this. That's amazing.
Thank you.
But like, it's a complete different target, complete different approach, complete different behavior. Sponsors as well, right? The brands that are interested into reaching a B2C market are completely different and are working differently than the ones who want to reach a B2B market. And my questions start to drag a little bit in length. So I'm going to stop it here. How do you do that?
Yes, it definitely is switching gears, and important to understand there are 2 different buckets in the way that I approach them. The good thing about the event is, I'm a very empathetic person. So I have the ability to say, like, put myself in somebody's shoes, like what. And then also being a financial professional, people investing money to come to an event, like what would make this valuable to them? People are giving up their money to come. They're giving up time with their family, their career, their business. And so I need to bring my A game and deliver on that. So I think that's, it's almost advantageous being a financial professional myself and knowing the struggles that I have, what would be of value. And so just being mindful of that, we're in this kind of together. I'm in the business, they're in the business, and what would create opportunities for them. I'm really big about that they're not just showing up and paying this money and getting to network. It's like, no, I've tried to bring companies here that are hiring people, interested in sponsoring, all of these reasons, like all the people coming together, why they could help each other. So all of the lessons I learned with my podcast and my company, Milmo, still apply to my conference, MoneyCon, but it's just a little bit of difference is that, these people aren't consumers. They are in the business of finance as well. And so just knowing, and it's actually just easier to like getting focused on what would be a great result for them, because is very similar to what I'm looking at is like, hey, I want to have value and impact, but I also want to make money at this. I want to be better at my craft. So it's easy to create an event that would be helpful because it's something that I could use myself. And so it's easier to figure things out.
In your B2C space, why not going wider? Because I'm like, so you're launching a complete different, it's a different business. You're leveraging the same knowledge, the same skills, the same network, but it's still a very different endeavor. And I understand you're very mission driven, which I like. You're doing what's right for your soul. This is going to be the most said word in this podcast episode because I love it that much. So why not going broader? For instance, I'm pretty sure that, education people, hospitality people, name your favorite industry here people, are also struggling with money, are also struggling with entrepreneurship. So why keeping the focus on military people and not just being like, hey, if I can help those people with money and entrepreneurship, I can just go broader instead of launching a new venture? Why is that? Why are you not doing this?
A couple of reasons. I think, in the beginning, I never imagined what I started could be where I'm at right now. Like, it's mind blowing to me. I just wanted to have a little coaching business, and it grew over time as I tried to get better at what I was doing, tried to make money at it. It just kind of continues to push you. So I think in the beginning, it's like I always say, starting a business is like having an imaginary friend. In the beginning, only you truly see it and believe it. And you have to make that real for other people to see. And so, in the beginning, I wasn't even believing it myself. And so didn't know it was possible to go outside of my niche, to go further. So I see that as a possibility, but now I also see that the other component is trying to stay true to, my ideal customer or my ideal listener for my show. And if I'm trying to help everybody with money, I end up not doing really good. And I learned that as a financial coach, trying to help people in my community that maybe have never served in the military. It was like we were speaking a different language. I would help them for 30 minutes and it felt like 3 hours, versus if I help a service member, I could talk to them for 3 hours and it feels like 10 minutes. It's like you get lost in it because you're vibing, you're zinging. And that's how I knew kind of, all right, this is where I need to stick. This is my zone of genius, the way I communicate, my directness, my sense of humor. It resonates with the military community more than other people. My jokes don't land as well,
And it's important.
Yes. Also, too, our slang, our acronyms, all these things are, better with the community. But then I started to notice over time is that me staying true to my audience actually drew in more people. So I have a lot of people that listen to my show that maybe have never served, but they had an extended family member serve. Or now I have more people listen that are interested in entrepreneurship, because now I'm an authentic member in the entrepreneurship community, because now, I have this Milmo, I have MoneyCon, not that I consider myself that successful, but like I do have experience that I can speak about. And so I feel like in the beginning, me not really thinking I was capable and understanding the true possibilities and then trying to, stick with my zone of genius and my audience, that focus actually helped me grow. And I see, in the future that it could evolve, and also to other business ideas. I'm sure you're like this too. Now I know what I'm capable of. So I know like, hey, I created an event. I could maybe do something else. So there's other ways I see, like especially for Milmo in 2026, I will do an in-person event. So now I'm going to take my skill set that I've learned from my B2B business and apply it to my already established B2C business and start in person helping people with money and entrepreneurship. And I'm really excited. That it's also scary, but I know that I'm capable. It's still going to be difficult, but I have the skill set now that I could apply. So I think, to go back to your question, is that I could expand, but I'm not trying to grow very big, very quickly. And I think unintentionally over time, it has grown to a larger audience outside of my niche. But me crafting podcasts and business ideas and things like that for my ideal customer has helped me grow.
So I wanted to bring you here because I kind of felt I knew the answer, but you're so spot on. And that's especially when starting a podcast or growing a podcast. This is actually so good. People think that they're going to reach a broader audience if they tackle more general topics. But what ends up happening is that it's usually the other way around. The fact that you're able to talk directly with the same language, the same slang, the same jokes, people that not only feel like they are belonging, but they can relate to you, they can relate to what you're saying. This is so powerful. Like niching down in a podcast and in any business really is so good. And you just explained it. Like as soon as you go broader, it's a whole different ballgame. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it's like it's a whole different ballgame and it doesn't vibe the same way. So like niching down, especially when starting a podcast or growing a podcast, is so, so good. Because on top of that, when people will see your content and they will see who you've helped, they will be able to, relate, identify. It's like, oh, but this person has helped like another 500 people exactly like me. It's this famous analogy of like, you have a back problem, you need surgery. Would you rather go to a doctor who has made 10,000 surgeries on 1,000 different organs? I don't know if there are 1,000 different organs, but you get the analogy. Or a surgeon who's done 10,000 back surgeries. Of course, you would go to the second one. And on top of that, you might even be willing to pay a premium for it. This is the power of niching down, and this is what you're doing. And this is absolutely awesome, Lacey. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your in-person events, B2C? Like what are you cooking? What's coming up?
Yes. So I have my event, MilMoneyCon, in San Antonio this year. San Antonio, Texas, and I'm trying to move it around the country every year, a new location to be close to the military communities, but also a fun location that people want to go to, and just trying to make a unique event that's not like anybody else, so that when people do invest their money to come to my conference, it's not going to be cookie cutter. It's going to they're going to feel the value and the opportunity. But I'm really excited because, the first few years, you're just figuring it out. And so now I feel like I know what I'm doing, and I'm really excited about, this year is basically almost here. But for 2026, I'm very excited about my knowledge base and also to knowing it's sustainable. So being able to hire help versus me doing every single thing by myself, and working in my zone of genius, like bringing in sponsors, bringing in attendees, crafting a really great conference with great content. And I hope to take all these lessons and make 2026 even better. And then hopefully eventually apply that to my B2B event. But yeah, no, I'm excited because again, I didn't know if it was possible. It was, my imaginary friend. And now I have an event that other people see as a real event, and they're starting to spread the word. And so it's starting to grow, just me trying to focus on that value and impact.
Yeah.
Then I think, everything will fall in line after that. But I just got to stay focused on, making sure it's valuable to people.
I love this. So let me pick your brain on this, Lacey, if you don't mind me. How do you create events from podcasts? Like, how do you go from, it's quite comfortable what we are doing here. You're in your office. I'm in my studio. We're like talking remotely at, I don't know how many 1,000 miles/kilometers away, and we're having a nice chat. But how do you go from that to, I'm just going to name a few elements, which I'm sure are part of a much larger mix. Book a room, potentially multiple rooms in hotels, right? Organize the decoration, the setup, whatever, which is probably another service provider. Organize the service, right? You're probably going to need people at these events. Communicating, marketing, making people come, making people stay, which I understand is one of the success criteria, actually. Like if people stay until the end of the conference, you've done your job. If like you don't have lots of people at any point in time, it's not. How do you go from this right now to an in-person event?
I think thinking about it is really important. It sounds very simple, but what that would look like, you're again, like it's an imaginary friend, like you're starting to envision it and see it. So you're crafting it in your mind.
No.
Then having, that understanding, then you can go to your audience and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this event. I think that's, has two good outcomes. Is one, now you've said it publicly, so you got to follow through with what you're saying. But two, you are able to ask your audience, like, what would you like? What would you like out of an event? And so that's you talking about it on the podcast, then maybe sending out a form to say, hey, what locations would you be interested in going to? What's the price point that you'd be willing to pay for a ticket? So starting to get that information from your audience. And like I say this in any business, like my coaching clients, whether that's money or business, I did it with the event. It's like, what would be a win for you after this is all said and done, after the event? Like, what's that feeling that you want walking out of here? What is that you want to get out of it? And so then you can get focused on, how do I make that a reality for them? How do I make that possible? And there are a lot of things to track. But I think it's just like anything in business. It's new, you don't understand it. So trying to stress about every little nuance of it is a waste of time. You actually just have to do it and figure it out. Like, it's not going to be perfect. And I've started to wrap my mind around, like, it's actually exciting when I fail or don't do well at something that I wanted to, because it's like, I'm competitive with myself. Like, I can do better than that. I can do better next year. So again, like, asking people and then doing it not on a huge scale. So starting small, like, my event, like, I know I'm not going to get 1,000 people, but if I could get 100, that'd be awesome. If I get 150, that would be even better. And so every year I'm like, if I could just have a growth rate, that's awesome. If I could not lose people, that would be a win for me. And then starting to wrap your mind around the prices, like call in hotels, call in event space, seeing how much this is going to cost me is very helpful. And then going and finding how you're going to make that. Like, are you going to charge it all in ticket sales? Or are you going to try to get sponsorship to fill those gaps? Like, how are you going to do it? Or are you just doing it out of the goodness of your heart? Like, for example, my podcast, maybe sponsorship. I don't need to get additional sponsorship. I just won't make as much money. I'm now going to apply this money to an event. So you just kind of have to figure out like how you are going to make it work. But I think, keeping it small the first go around and then focusing on making it an amazing experience. So even if you only have 10 people show up, those 10 people go out to the world and be like, that was worth every penny.
To follow up on one of the things you just mentioned, would you recommend going out of pocket for the first event? Kind of getting the proof of concept, proof of work for the first one, even if that means you're at a loss. But then the negotiation afterwards is much easier with potential sponsors, potential, providers, who is just like, no, I've done this. It worked. Here are the feedbacks. Here is how much I've put on the table. Here is how much I need for the next one. That's going to get funded. Would you recommend something like this, or would you try and get it financed from the get-go as well?
I would try to get somebody else to pay for it from the get-go. And two, people don't value what they don't pay for. So even if you're only charging, $10, $20 for a ticket, people are still making an investment. So I would say you should charge for tickets, because then a lot of people just won't show up, and then you've made all these plans and then it's a waste, or you've lost money in other areas. Because let's say you get a sponsor, they're going to want to know how many people you think are going to show up. And if that number doesn't show up, then it's like, okay, you didn't deliver on that number. So I think, for me, when I started this, I went to people that I knew that had conferences and I asked for their advice. Like, what should I focus on? What should I not worry about?
Yeah.
And one of my mentors that helped me, he was very clear, like, these are the top 5 things to go for, like, handle these things first. And then, and the one thing he told me, and he's like, you got to get real comfortable with risk. Like, can you lose this money? And wrapping your mind around that, I think, is really important. But then the other thing I think that gave me a huge advantage was attending other conferences or other events, and then also volunteering at them. Seeing how it works behind the scenes, I think, is really important, because some of the things you wouldn't think are important, like check-in. Check-in is actually very important. That's the first impression a new attendee has of your event and your management of it. So if it's a mess, that's the first impression that you gave them, that you are a hot mess, and you definitely don't want that. And so I volunteered at quite a few check-ins to see how they streamline things. I worked at one that they just totally failed. I could see people just like, just turned off by the way that they were treated when they were checked in. They were confused. The people working the counter didn't even know what was going on, versus I've worked one, it's a well-oiled machine. They're respectful, they're kind, welcoming, and positive to the people that show up. And you start to see, like, what type of event do I want to put on? Yeah. And then all the things like signage, working with hotels or event spaces. You won't get deep into it as a volunteer, but you'll still see a lot of things. So I think, like, starting to get involved in that space is really important. And volunteering is a great way to get behind the scenes.
Amen to that. I'm realizing, Lacey, that we didn't talk a lot about your podcast, but I absolutely love this. So let me ask you this to maybe wrap this up. What was your biggest challenge with the podcast, and how did you walk around it?
I think worrying what other people think has been my biggest challenge. I'm a lot better now than I was in the beginning, but am I good enough as a financial professional? Am I good enough as a podcaster? Oh, I don't have as many downloads. I don't have, maybe as good a flow a show as everybody else. And I have a topic that's not as fun, when we're talking about money sometimes. And so really thinking about all of those things is just an absolute waste of time. And I get mad when I think about how much time I've wasted worrying what other people think instead of just get going
Yeah.
and try. And it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to, everybody's not going to love you. That's not real in friendships, relationships. It's not going to be real in podcasting. And so I think, in worrying about what other people think was a problem. And then also to the impact of, it slows you down and you're trying to be like somebody else. Instead, when I started really leaning into like, no, this is who I am. This is the way I speak. Sometimes I mess up and I'm not the sharpest, or I'm not the smartest necessarily about money. I'm not the smartest about entrepreneurship, but I do really care. I work really hard and trying to communicate that to my audience. I think, once I got in that mindset, instead of thinking about what other people are thinking, and the value I could provide to people, things got a lot easier. So I would say, that was a big challenge for me.
Absolutely love this. Lacey, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. If people want to find out more about you, about Milmo, about what you do, about your events, where should they go?
Yes. So Milmo, my podcast is milmo.co. You can connect with me there. I'm also all over social media. And then for my event, MilMoneyCon, it's just milmoneycon.com. Has all the information about my event and also can connect with me there if you're interested in the event space. But yeah, also on social media for MilMoneyCon.
We'll put all the links in the description. Why Milmo? What does that stand for?
Well, that's going to have to be a whole nother show, but I had a trademark battle and I was trying to come up with something very unique, but kind of catchy, something near the military. And so that was something I really wanted to be different. So that's why I landed on Milmo.
Milmo meaning, and I'm Googling right now, what's the meaning of Milmo?
There is no meaning. It's just, there's no word. It doesn't mean anything. And that was intentional to make sure that it wasn't a normal word. Kind of like Google is not a real word, but they just chose that because same thing like Spanx, not a real word, but it's definitely protected by a trademark.
Nice. Lacey, we'll put all the links in the description. Thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.